you for joining us today. My name is Allison Carvalho. I'm an events coordinator here at ASUG, and I will be your moderator. Welcome to today's webcast, SAP GTS Broker Integration, Lessons from EchoStar and Ropaar regarding integrating with Expeditors. For the best viewing experience, we recommend using an internet connection, a wired internet connection, and closing any programs running in the background. This webcast is being recorded. All registrants will receive an email with a link to review this content should you wish to do so in the future. If you have any questions about any of the content being presented during the webcast, please feel free to type in those questions using the Q&A box on your screen. As time permits, we'll get to as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. As an encouragement to our ASUG members to share your feedback and suggestions with us, we've also included a survey that we'd like you to take at the end of the webcast. If you're unable to remain on the line, we will be including it in our post-event email. I'd like to pass this webcast on to our speakers. Jitendra, take it away.
Thank you, Allison. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webcast on GTS Broker Integration with Ropaar and EchoStar. My name is Jitendra Singh. I'm the Practice Director for Global Trade and Transportation Practice at Ropaar. And over the course of next about 40-45 minutes or so, we wanted to share our lessons implementing broker integration functionality at EchoStar. So with me, I have our friends from EchoStar who are going to be introducing themselves in a little bit. But just wanted to mention a few words before we get into the meat of the presentation. So SAP came out with the broker integration functionality, which was much in demand, much requested about 4 or 5 years ago, and we were lucky to be engaged by EchoStar to implement this functionality in their environment for integrating with Expeditors that happened to be their broker of choice at that point in time. It was a legacy solution that they were wanting to sunset and move on to Global Trade Services, which already existed in their environment. And this was leveraging and getting a little more entitlement from existing applications that were being used by EchoStar. So let's start with the agenda for the day. So over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to have a short introduction about Ropaar that helped EchoStar in the implementation. And we're going to take it away from there with an introduction of EchoStar, then walk you through the project summary, the timeline, and mention some of the technical and business challenges that we encountered along the way. The idea here is to obviously share our project experience that can then be leveraged by other businesses and attendees in their own respective journey of integrating with their brokers or forwarders, and maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that we encountered along the way to full integration between EchoStar and Expeditors that happen to be their brokers. Towards the end, we're going to have about 10-15 minutes of Q&A where we'll take questions and hopefully get to all the questions that come along the way. So to begin with, so this webcast is sponsored by Ropaar. We were the implementation partners for EchoStar. So we've been in existence for about 10 years. We're an SAP services partner with a keen solution focus on global trade and transportation solutions. So collectively, we have about 150 plus years of experience and implementations that we've done amongst all our consultants at Ropaar. We're a SAP services partner, and our solution focused, as we said, is on global trade and transportation domains, specifically around SAP solutions on global trade services, transportation management, the S/4HANA international trade, and the SAP watchlist screening. With that, I would like to hand it over to Marcus and Avinash to do an introduction and walk us through the remainder of the presentation. Avinash?
Hey, I'm Avinash Nandi. I'm a principal program analyst at Hughes Network Systems. I have 10 years of experience in SAP supply chain management and GTS implementations. I handle all the customizations in export and import processes, broker integrations using SAP PIPO, SAP GTS integrations with other systems like Hughes, Portals, UPS, and data providers like MK Data, etc. Actually, I'm a little under the weather today. I'll be here all during the presentation and Q&A, but I'll turn my mic off, and Marcus will be taking over from here, and I will handle any technical questions in the Q&A session. Thank you, and over to you, Marcus.
Hello, my name is Marcus Campbell. I'm with Hughes. I've been in SAP 20 plus years, GTS probably the last 7 to 10. I guess just a brief overview of our company. Sorry about this presentation, the animation here. Hughes, we're a global communications company. This is just a brief overview of our global presence, some of our customers and partners around the globe. We do VSAT, communication VSAT. Gosh, I cannot believe I just did this. This is our customer base, our revenue. This is as of March of 2021. So I'll get right into the meat of things. 2019, we were approached by the business to implement a solution to bring efficiencies to our existing environment. So prior to the project with Ropaar, our pre-existing environment, we had, it was pretty much all manual. So all of our pre-entry information from the brokers was communicated via email, where we would communicate our classification information, receive our 7501 entry forms all by email. We would stack them, file them, and retain them. Okay. So what we were really looking to do with the implementation was move from a manual email file-based paper, hard copy paper environment to, it's doing a couple things. So the one enhancement we did kind of outside the system was we initiated an 856 EDI ASN coming in from our broker, being Expeditors. This 856 EDI would come in, create the SAP inbound delivery, but this 856 is really just providing transportation information, departure arrival dates, bill of lading, tracking numbers, and everything. The 856 would create the inbound delivery, and then this is really where the project we brought Ropaar in to communicate or to assist us with is following the GTS importer-centric model. We would, once the inbound delivery is created, we transfer it to GTS. It goes into the work list before goods receipt. That once the import declaration's created, we enabled enhanced completion checks because we enabled functionality to automatically create the 3461 clearance instruction, which would then be sent to the broker. And the broker in return would return the 7501 brokerage feed, which would automatically update GTS. Our timeline for this project was a total of 9 months. So we began January of 2019. We had 3 months of, 3 months of analysis, 2 months, a month of design, and then I believe 4 months of development and 2 months for testing. Really what we were trying to do here is improve efficiencies. We wanted to take out all the manual data entry from our users. And with that manual data entry, there's a lot of errors and it's just tedious work to do that. So all in all, we were estimating a 15% reduction in manual processing time, and we expected to recover the cost of the project in 5 years. So again, we were looking for assistance from Ropaar to enable, configure SAP GTS importer-centric functionality. And in doing this, it was also our first implementation using SAP IPO application. So we were looking for guidance and assistance to develop the outbound 3461 clearance instruction to send to Expeditors and develop the inbound 7501 brokerage feed. Also assistance in status updates, accuracy checks, the field mapping for each of the interfaces, the update logic for the 7501, incompletion checks, the inbound outbound file processing of the XML files, and error management and email notification. Okay, so I don't know if you guys could, yeah, okay. So primarily the 856 ASN, it's the blue line coming in here from Expeditors at the top left-hand corner. That 856 was, we enabled that to bring in transportation, entry, arrival, departure data. It would update SAP. The inbound delivery would then go to GTS, and in the blue box is really where the focus was. So once our inbound delivery is in GTS, we go to the work list before goods receipt, and we convert the inbound delivery into the clearance or into the import declaration. And upon saving the import declaration, it automatically generates the 3461, which goes to Expeditors. And because of the dependencies between the 3461 and the 7501, we added in a plethora of incompletion checks. And bear with me, I have Avinash's notes here. He's not feeling that well, so I'll fill in his technical details. I think in this 3461, we added a total of 69 custom fields to complete our incompletion check rules to enhance that. And upon receipt of the 7501 XML structure back from Expeditors, we bring it in, parse it through PIPO, and then directly update the import declaration in SAP GTS, which triggers a message type creation, which creates our 7501. Our goal is to reproduce the 7501 exactly as it appears from Expeditors. And I need to add in here, one of the reasonings for this is using the file-based hard copy model, we would have to take all of our entry documents and everything and literally put them in a vanilla folder, file that, and we try and retain it for 7 years. So one of the things we were looking for as an additional benefit was to do away with all that paper trail and have electronic copies and be able to retain all our documentation for audit purposes within the system. So just a reminder, the importer-centric process, which is what we did. So the ASN, this ASN is really, we're electronically receiving that ASN from Expeditors, which creates the inbound delivery, which the inbound delivery is what transfers to GTS. That inbound delivery is then created into the customs declaration, the web service PIPO, we parse that out, transfer that to the broker, Expeditors. Expeditors then performs the entry, communicates with customs. They send us back the 7501 entry forms. We do an accuracy check. In this accuracy check, we also have custom email or custom error notifications. And from that, we update the import declaration in GTS. So moving into our technical challenges. So I guess overall, from my perspective, it's once you step into the XML structures, the PIPO data mapping, and the GTS field updates, that really is where the rubber meets the road. So just some of the things going through here. So with PIPO and with the XML structures presented from PIPO, they all have the core mappings for the core fields, and I'll call core fields things such as the entry number, the core fields of their 7501. What we had to do, but what we couldn't find was the 7501 that comes from Expeditors or comes from your broker has many more fields in it than the PIPO has many more fields in the XML structure than the standard mapping includes. So there was a big exercise to go through and map additional fields, which we wanted to update in our system. Yeah, so during this, we had to create the custom PIPO proxy fields and enhancements to update the import declaration. We also ran into translation, just some issues with translation, such as in the XML structure, they would call the field vessel ID, but in the PIPO mapping, it would be called cross-border transport means ID, and that field would then map to a GTS field conveyance name. So it was not a one-for-one mode of transport doesn't equal mode of transport equals mode of transport. You're going to do a lot of translating between your XML structure from the broker through PIPO, and then the fields you're updating in GTS. Also, don't assume all the broker integrations if you're using, I forgot to say this, but at the same, we also integrated with UPS. So we ran into things like the export in Expeditors uses the foreign port code, but UPS will use a UN location code. So these little segments, and in the structure, they may put the foreign port code or the UN location code in the same XML field. So you do custom mappings for each XML, different rules for each XML structure. Also things like if the mode of transport was 40 or 41, then the vessel ID would equal the flight number in GTS. But if the mode of transport's 10 or 11, the vessel ID is the conveyance name. So all these update rules are mapped on the PIPO side, and that was in the technical effort. Last thing, when you invoking these update rules, it makes you get your align your data in GTS to receive the codes. So we had a big effort where we had to go through, identify the correct mappings for SCAC codes, your custom codes, ITA, port codes. The foreign port codes are entered into a field that has a check table behind it. So you actually have to enter your foreign port codes in a separate table, separate transaction, before they can accept it. So we would have update failures due to missing compliance or codes that were in the 7501 that weren't in our system. Avinash, do you have anything on this?
Yeah, sure. Let me elaborate a little, a few more points on the technical challenges we encountered during this broker integration using PIPO. Like Marcus has already mentioned, we have to enhance a huge amount of incompletion checks while we are executing the clearance instructions. And we had to almost introduce 69 technical GTS import declaration fields into using baddies. And also there are some fields that are missing in the proxy structure. We used to get those fields in the XML from the broker, and our users want those fields to be updated in the import declaration. But those fields are missing in the PIPO proxy structure SAP has given us. For example, the import date, export date, and all the planned arrival dates, those are missing in the proxy structure. So we had to enhance in the PIPO using some text fields. Once those data comes into GTS, we have to introduce some baddies in between to map those text fields to the actual date fields so that the import declaration gets updated. In the same way, we had to do those for the master bills, house bills, and stuff. And the most technical challenge we faced is at the error notifications. Like our users want email notifications for all the failures, for all the successes. And sometimes we get a brokerage feed without an import declaration created in our system. So those messages get failed in the PIPO. So we had to write some custom jobs in the PIPO system, and also some ABAP programs that runs around those PIPO systems to collect all those messages, send an email to the users. And also the email structure given by the standard PIPO is very unstructured, is very technical, and the users would not understand those. So we had to enhance the structure so the users know what brokerage feed came in, so that what they have to do in the GTS system and stuff. The other technical challenge we faced is sometimes we get a mismatch in the brokerage feed than what is in our system. So our users want to know those errors too. And we had to, again, implement some background jobs in the PIPO and also in the SAP GTS system, so that they would get those emails on time, and they can take necessary action on that one. One more other thing I want to mention was if there are a lot of other things our users want while they create the import declarations, which the brokerage feed is offering, but the PIPO was not offering. So we had to we try to enhance the PIPO structures in the PIPO, and also we had to map all those structures in the GTS baddies. And the last thing I want to mention was there was no clear-cut documentation where we can say, okay, this brokerage feed XML tag maps to this GTS import declaration field. So we had to debug the SAP standard program to know what is mapping to what, and we can go ahead and map those fields in the PIPO. These are some of the technical challenges we face, which we like to bring it up during this presentation. And over to Marcus again.
Okay. Also, one of the things we had to do is to send the clearance instruction out. We added enhancements to roll up by invoice number in HTS logic. And prior to this, we had been sending clearance instructions in a flat file format, but the format we were originally sending data in didn't roll up by the invoice HTS logic. So there was some customization involved there to meet the requirements of the Expeditors spec. And again, the importance of when you get this Expeditors requirements doc, it's very detailed, and at a glance, it looks like it's going to be straightforward, but when you really get down into the field levels, the formats, everything, there's some tweaks and changes you need to that you'll find that may require customizations in the mapping, not so much on the GTS side to accept the data, but in the mapping to change the format of the data you may receive to the format that GTS will accept it. The last bullet point here is the file processing, error management, error processing, and email notifications. Avinash kind of touched on most of this, but there's a lot of, there was an effort for the reprocessing of messages. So in the importer-centric model, we chose to fail the inbound 7501 if we had not yet created the inbound delivery in GTS. So all those failures, anytime the inbound fails, we would reprocess those orders. We have a mechanism to keep that reprocessing in place for 30 days. And there's also a need to maintain a history or be able to track or find the failed errors so that we know. A lot of times our users come back and they're like, hey, where's the update for this import declaration? Have we received it yet? Can you find it? So we go back, we have to go through the reprocessing files to find the file, to tell them when we first received it, make sure that it's reprocessed so that the update happens. So there were some enhancements we put in place there. That was primarily the reasons for the enhancements that went out for the email notifications. And yeah, so reporting our users lookup entries by bill of lading or tracking numbers. So we built some custom reports to allow entry information to be looked up by the bill of lading or tracking number. So the key business impacts were implementing the importer-centric model versus the broker-centric model. Being importer-centric model where you're gonna always create your import declaration, send the clearance instruction prior to entry. Our users requested this primarily, I think, because they wanted the reference data to be in place. But with that model, of course, what happens if the import declaration isn't created? We would fail the import and reprocess it. We had timing issues between the ocean, air, and other, mainly being that ocean tends to flow through nicely because you have a long time between your departure and your arrival. It's the air shipments where the ASN may come in the same day or the following day, the entry will be performed. So just kind of aligning the business with the need to process the incoming import declarations in time. Prior to integrating with Expeditors, you had leeway there because it was all manual, but now it requires your users to stay on top of your daily entry log and create your import declarations in a timely manner. Also, we made some customizations or had to align business processes to handle miscellaneous imports, returns processing, and third-party drop shipments. The project considerations, it's the tedious nature of this project. It was difficult for coordination between legal compliance, logistics, IT, Expeditors, and UPS resources. The Expeditors, UPS technical resources are very structured. They basically supply that XML structure, and then you're left to decipher it. All the communication back and forth between them for clarification on what this field means, what that means, it was a tedious process. Again, when we did this, everybody wasn't all on one location, so a lot of this communication was done via email. It was not something that I would recommend doing along with your day job. That's how we kind of initially started out doing, but it's just once you're ingrained down into the field mapping, into that, it's not really something you can go walk away for a couple hours, come back and do your day job. It's very much a momentum project. So if you can stay focused, get it done quickly, that's an advantage. The other thing was just identifying the system data that's required for the business to update, MID IDs, IATA codes, SCAT codes, region codes, firms, port codes, a lot of data that the business needs to update and maintain. Identifying that, communicating that, and developing processes to make sure that's in your system. And then last thing was the technical testing. So we had a lot of course, success during the technical testing. We'd build these perfect files and everything and pass them through and everything. We had a high success rate, or we were able to test successfully during our integration tests. Where we ran into problems is the real world data tests. So if you have an opportunity to create, take production files and send as many of those through your test scenario, that is highly recommended. And my last point is there's little to no. SAP provides the conceptual documentation, meaning you get the slide for the importer centric. It's not a lot of detail. There's no F1 in PIPO where you can find out what the field means. So you're going to rely a lot on that. That's really where that's where the value of Ropaar came in, just assisting us with deciphering information during the mapping. Where are we at? Yeah, so that wraps up our technical and business review. As we open up this now for any questions.
Yeah, I think before we, Marcus, this is Jitendra here. I think before we open up for the Q&A, and I can see a whole bunch there in the chat window. I think one of the things I wanted to at least touch upon is, we went through the whole project, and there were a sequence of decisions that led you down certain paths, right? You were already kind of engaged with Expeditors in the past. There were some decision points where you decided that EchoStar will subscribe to the implementation method that Expeditors or UPS are putting out for you, right? You're not. So one of the things that you guys decided was you will use PIPO to map the GTS structures or the GTS XML documents to the implementation needs or the implementation guide from Expediter and UPS. I think that's one of the key things to take away from this. So depending upon your leverage with the broker, as well as the kind of technical environment you have, the amount of time and effort you're budgeting for the project, that might take you down certain paths. So that's one of the important things that you have to keep in mind if you're considering this using the broker integration. The second thing I wanted to point out was also, architecturally from SAP, there are two distinct methods of integrating with the broker, either importer-centric or broker-centric. And the idea is they are very clean, two different methods altogether. In the importer-centric, the importer, is owning all the data and driving what the broker does. And the broker is not allowed to make any changes. The only thing they do is take the data as is file and give you a successful entry back with some additional transportation data elements and a few other small pieces of data. The other method is the broker-centric, where the broker owns the data, or the broker leads and files the broker-centric declaration, and you simply accept the copy into your system. So it's there for you to do any kind of audits. So through the project, I think what EchoStar and their business users kind of discovered, or as they went through the process, was what they really want was something that was kind of a mix of the two. So they want the control of the importer-centric. So I think that's one of the key messages from this implementation and this experience, is that there is no clean, one or the other. It's usually a mix. And what EchoStar decided to do was to use the importer-centric model, do a lot of, so they are in control of the data, but also capture whatever additional information is coming back from the broker. So way more above and beyond the few data elements that standard SAP says an importer-centric model will allow you to receive. So I think that's one of the key messages that we also wanted to convey as a part of this this presentation, is to keep that in mind. That you might end up in a place where you're kind of using both models, and in some cases enhancing the system as it exists for your needs, but trying to meld the two processes so that you have full control of the data, and on top of it, you're also not losing any information just because you're using importer-centric. So I think with that, I wanted to maybe go down the questions and see if we can start answering some of them. So I see, Marcus, I think this one might be more for you, or you might have already alluded to it. So what was the reason for failing the unsolicited 7501 and then creating the import declaration in GTS instead of using the broker-centric model? I think you started talking about it.
That was driven by the business. Again, they want the reference documents. So they want the sales order, the inbound delivery, all the reference documents in the history for the import declaration. With the broker-centric model, the entries performed, and then, so the broker-centric model did not have the reference documents. The 75 would come in, update the import declaration, and the importer-centric did. So we chose to fail that and reprocess the entries after the import declaration was created. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So the other question is also, I think it's more of a business process question around, did the broker feed create the inbound delivery in the background? Or did your system create the inbound delivery and it married up the data the broker was sending you? I think maybe...
I think Avinash, if you jump in on this one.
Yeah, sure. So the inbound deliveries were created by the 856 EDI messages we get from the broker, but not the brokerage feed. We would be marrying the data from the brokerage feed to the already created inbound delivery or the import declaration. So basically, we are updating the already created inbound delivery or the import declaration with the brokerage fee data, but not creating the delivery with the brokerage fee.
Right. So I think the other question I see here is, did you use the standard 3461, 7501 message types that exist for EDI feed, yes, or did you use the MB001 that SAP created for broker integration, or a hybrid of both?
A hybrid of both. So we do use the MB1 brokerage feed. That is triggered upon the successful update, and we are using the standard message types to present the data for users. A lot of times they want to go in and view the 7501. So we use both. And that actually is
one. Sorry, go ahead.
Part of what comes into play when the 7501 comes in and updates your system. Really, it's about how that information is presented in the message type. So as we were receiving more and more data, we would find the correct field location to present it in the standard message type.
Yeah. Okay, so there's another one. Do we need PIPO, or can GTS directly communicate with the broker? So I think maybe I can take that too. So in this instance, EchoStar decided to use PIPO. You're obviously not obligated to. You can use any other middleware, external-facing integration tool that might be a standard in your specific company. But for EchoStar, that was the decision they made. The second part of the question is, can GTS directly communicate with the broker? So theoretically, yes. I mean, technically, it's possible. But any integration specialist or data security specialist will tell you that you really want a middleware tool that's kind of external facing and does a lot of the authentication of your business partners. So technically, yes, the answer is that you can communicate directly, but for all practical purposes, you would almost always use a middleware tool in the middle to maybe not even do translations, just to do the technical integration with the broker partner. What else? So there's some question about, did you reach out to SAP regarding the deficiencies of not having the IATA code in the vendor master and not a way to provide that information in the BP master? Do you remember any such challenges around master data?
So I guess that's a two-part question. No, we did not reach out to SAP about the deficiencies. That's kind of what I'm talking about. It was, as we were going through the project, we were discovering all this as that was happening. Prior to this, we had maintained IATA codes, SCAT codes for all our carriers and this and that. So we were, as we find the SCAT code mappings, we were kind of populating all of this and learning as we went. So I don't think we quite identified it as a deficiency yet. I'm not sure what between the customer master and the so no, we did not reach out.
Yeah.
Trying to find the question. Sorry. Yeah, the ATA codes weren't in our vendor master. They were only provided that we add that information directly in GTS.
So I see another kind of a business process type question for non-related shipments. Are there elements of manual data entry and validations being performed by the importer in SAP GTS specifically regarding data from commercial invoices? If not, how are CI data populated in SAP GTS that is directly from the third-party supplier or the PO? So I think if I remember right, Marcus, you guys are not using the invoice object for creating your declarations, right? You're only using PO and inbound deliveries.
Correct.
So
all the invoice information we receive from a supplier is updated in the inbound delivery on the ECC side. So, right, that invoice information may come in on an 856 that updates the inbound delivery. So when the inbound delivery comes across the GTS, we already have the invoice information.
Right. I think the question might specifically be around valuation, because that's the only thing that would be still with the purchase order, would be in the purchase order, and the next document you would expect it would be in the commercial invoice. So for your business, I'm assuming, or at least what I'm remembering is that even for your external supplier purchase orders and commercial invoices, you're expecting like zero variance in valuation, right? Otherwise, your import entries might be different in terms of valuation. Does that? Am I remembering correctly? Because that's one of the reasons why I think you guys are not using the invoice object as a document for creating your import entries.
What question are you looking at? The number?
So number 11.
Okay.
I think it's showing up a second from the top right now.
Yeah.
I think part of it might be for Avinash, if there's any accuracy checks that you've implemented around matching up with commercial invoices from a supplier versus the import entry that you've received from Expeditors.
Yeah, sure. So all the commercial invoice and everything, we give the data to the broker using clearance instructions. We roll up based on the commercial invoice and the HTS numbers, but we did not put any accuracy check while updating the import declaration. The only accuracy check we introduced for the inbound message or the brokerage feed is to match the house bill numbers and the transportation documents, but not on the commercial invoice data.
Okay. Yeah, so the underlying assumption then is that your PO line information and valuation is matching exactly with the commercial invoice, so the supplier cannot deviate from it.
That's what the expectation was.
Right.
And I guess maybe we do not create any imports. And imports are never initiated in GTS. They'll always require a PO inbound delivery from the feeder system. So we're not directly creating shipments in there. So in the inbound delivery, we are transferring the invoice at the line item level. Does that make sense? So I didn't know if maybe you were asking for these third-party shipments or something, if they're initiating out of the system, how we're getting that data there. But all our imports are initiated from the feeder system.
Okay. There's a clarification on one of the questions, but I think that's pretty close to all the questions that I see.
Yeah, so the last question there, the SCAC are in LFA1. We maintain the SCAC and IATA codes are not coming from the feeder system partner master. They're maintained by logistics personnel in GTS. LFA1 being a table in ECC or ERP. That's not where we're maintaining SCAC IATA codes. They're directly entered into GTS and maintained in GTS.
Yeah, I think so that this specific issue might be moot for you guys. Okay, I think that was the last of the questions.
So there is a question in there for how does the system manage filing with PGAs, for example, FDA? In the XML structures from the brokers, there's the PGA mapping and everything exists. You just have to make sure that your PGA structures are, you switch from the OGA to the PGA structures in GTS, and that all of the during classification, that the associated PGA codes are entered in your master data. So in other words, if it's a monitor and it's using a FDA code, PGA code, when you do the classification, you add that PGA code to your classification data. When you create the clearance instructions, send the clearance instructions out, the PGA data is sent out and received. It also important to note, with our implementation, we're not updating any HTS or classification data. That's all confirmed and checked when the clearance instructions are sent out.
And I think just maybe as an addition, as a follow-up to that answer, I think just because of the nature of your business, the PGA the amount of PGA data that needs to accompany your specific import clearance is not a lot, just because of the nature of your business. I mean, if you're in life sciences or chemical industries, FDA, EPA would demand a lot of additional data. I think that's basically where that question is coming from. So there aren't, there's a shell of a structure for PGA data, in addition to the classification and the OGA codes and disclaimed or not disclaimed. There's additional data that another government agency might desire as a part or require as a part of your entry filing. So in your instance, I think that's maybe what the silver lining was, that the nature of your business doesn't require a whole lot of other additional data elements to be sent, besides classifications and the OGA codes and whether you disclaim or not. Do you see any other questions?
I see a question in there on the reaching out to SAP regarding providing a better shell for implementation checks.
Or incomplete?
No.
Yes.
Again, we didn't reach out to SAP for better incompletion checks, but as is the nature in GTS, it's constantly evolving. So I believe during this process, we were also introducing new functionality to handle additional tariff numbers, changing our structures. So yeah, because we actually we had questions. The actual additional HTS 301 HTS tariffs were added while we were mid-project here. So clarification on that kind of stuff, it's really negotiating it with your expeditors, with the broker, to map the data into the system. Once we started customizing our incompletion checks, I don't think we ever turned back to, quote, look at SAP. We just automatically started creating custom code to meet our needs.
Yeah. I think maybe there's an opportunity here to influence or give feedback to SAP in terms of similar to for self-filing scenarios. There's a whole structure for managing incompletions. Maybe a little easier way to manage some of the commonly occurring incompletions that would be true for almost every importer, regardless of what jurisdiction you're in. But I think that point is valid. From a project standpoint, yes, it makes sense. When we started going down a certain path, informing SAP or talking to SAP about improvements is the last thing. You're just trying to meet your project timelines and making sure you have all the incompletions in place by the time you go live. So you're sending complete entry data or to the maximum possible to your broker.
Right. And I will add this in there. So as we were going through this project, right, so they hadn't introduced formal logic in GTS yet for handling UN location codes. So we used customization to create a hybrid where we would literally attach the UN location code to a foreign port code. Why? Because in the 7501, you don't present a UN location code, you present the foreign port code. So we were marrying UN location codes with the foreign port code. When the feed would come in, we would populate the foreign port code for the UN location code, if that makes sense. So all of this was done custom, and now within the past few months here, a formal structure has been created to handle UN location codes in GTS. So some of this is once you go down that customization route and you've started manipulating your update rules and stuff like this, even though a functionality may come to handle this in a different way, you're kind of stuck in your custom one, and you don't really go back and change that code to start using the standard GTS functionality. That's kind of how some of that happened for us. So, right, since we did this project, SAP may have already come in and enhanced incompletion check rules. Sorry.
I think we're on top of the hour and out of time. I believe all the questions have been answered from the chat window. Allison, I think we're ready to close. Thanks a lot. Thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to your feedback. Marcus, Avinash, appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation. Please make sure to keep an eye out for an email, which will include a link to review this content. And don't forget to fill out the survey so you can let our speakers know what you thought. Thank you all again for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.